All right, so let me just try and wrap my head around this because it's going to take a bit of a second for me to get in. Pillow fighting has officially become a combat sport, and not just any, but a professional combat sport with like its own championship and shit. Like, I don't know if it's just me that sees problems in this, but if that's the case and it is actually considered to be some sort of a professional combat sport, that means that the precursor to foreplay now can actually be considered domestic violence in a sense. And I don't know how you want to look at it, but I see this as a massive problem. And I'm sorry. Like, I know it almost makes it sound like I'm being a buzzkill here, and I'm sorry for doing that, but I just figured I should start with that just so that people can kind of understand how much of a problem this could be. Because when you think about it, pillow fighting's been good as like just a casual thing that two people that were very close with each other would do. You know, siblings, but more so people in relationships. They'd grab pillows, they'd hit each other, they'd toss them at each other, especially if they were fighting, be it friendly, be it serious. And normally, or at least a lot of times, you'd find that shit would actually build up to some sort of a sex scene that happens afterwards. Because, you pillow fight, then, you grab each other, then some foreplay happens and clothes start coming off, blah, blah, blah. You all know how that usually, like, kind of just builds up and one thing leads to another. And it's fun. It's amazing. It's a great thing to happen. But now you're telling me that it's considered as a combat sport. Like, contact, fine. Combat, no. Like, this is a problem. Because now imagine someone is in court, and is busy charging the other person with like, domestic violence and shit. And then they're being told, please narrate the ordeal. And someone's like, so we grabbed a pillow and he knocked me out with it and I fell down and I hit my head. And that time the prosecution is like, Your Honor, you can clearly see that this is a damaged person who's been wrecked by physical and mental abuse that's been dealt by the hands of the oppressor on this other side. And that time the lawyer on the other side is busy looking at them and is like, excuse me, if I may ask, when you guys usually do have a pillow fight, because it's been said that you guys have had pillow fights lots of times, true?
Yes.
Can you say that most times it's led to some form of lovemaking?
Yes.
And you said that you usually like it when you guys do that because it leads to makeup sex, right?
Yes.
So can you actually say that he did not expect that to be makeup sex afterwards? Objection, Your Honor. This one is leading the witness. And that time you're like, no. I'm only asking questions. And I have one more question for your client. Please explain to the court why you are saying that this toxic behavior should be placed on my client's shoulders, yet you were the one that began the pillow fight, claiming that it was something that was supposed to lead into some form of lovemaking.
But he hit me.
No further questions, Your Honor. Oh shit, like now that I think about it, I think I might actually make for like a pretty interesting like law series writer or some shit. Anyways, that aside, I barely know jack shit about law or domestic violence. At least what I do know about is this podcast, which discusses love, sex, and relationships, which I actually think I'm pretty good at. So I might as well get to what it is that I'm good at and start by saying, welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who would hate to get KO'd by a pillow. Like, you can get KO'd by a punch and that one you can take it. But imagine like getting knocked out with someone's pillow. Like, the social ramifications of that shit are not something that you will take back very easily. He is a man who once believed that MILF was a combination of milk and beef. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Tweetstreet, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets, and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, the drill is pretty simple. And it's a drill that I don't mind explaining to you guys 100 times because it's a way that we can get to interact and become a part of the show. So that this actually feels like a team effort, even though it is actually a team effort one way or another. So it's a very simple way for you to send me the tweets that you would like me to discuss. And it's a very simple drill, almost sounds like a song, especially with the way I'll repeat it. And if you do know the drill, then you can repeat it after me. And if you don't know the drill, then you can listen in and maybe even participate. But in the next episode of Tweetstreet, maybe you can also join in. And it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take them from there and I will handle it accordingly on Facebook or on IG, because I know some of y'all like taking screenshots, like getting the screen grabs from those places. Y'all don't have to send them on Twitter. You can send them to @BreakTime on on Facebook and @BreakTime on IG. The DMs are always open, and I would love to take some of them and handle them accordingly, because I feel as though a lot of the tweets that end up on IG or on Facebook as screenshots or as like snippets and screen grabs usually have either very, very unique questions that need to be discussed by a large majority of us, or have some very big topics that people do not want to start addressing. But anyways, that said, we should move on to our tweets for this episode. But before I get to that, we need to talk about Rihanna for a little bit. And yes, I know she's pregnant and ASAP is the father. Like, I feel like that's been the biggest news on IG or even in the pop culture internet for the past couple of days. Like, we get it. Like, move on from that shit. And just for clarification, no, I was not going to do this entire section on that pregnancy. I feel like people have spoken about that shit until it's actually annoying to get onto the internet and look through IG or Twitter or even other places. Like, my issue isn't with that. My issue is actually with the lingerie collection that she released just in time for Valentine's Day for men. Like, let me just get this straight. There is a lingerie line for men. And I kid you the fuck not, I went and I looked at these pictures and I honestly don't know what to say. Like, I really want to talk shit. I really, really want to just take a dump on whoever the hell it is that decided that making lingerie for guys was a thing. Because, I don't know, like, I feel like this one was actually made for the LGBT community. More so the Gs, the gay people, maybe even the bis. Because, like, I know that this doesn't necessarily work for us straight guys. Because when you look at straight guys, like, yes, there's those of us that love our women in lingerie. Like, I think there's a ton of guys, a huge majority of guys that love their women in lingerie. But with us guys, our lingerie to women is usually like a very masculine look with some clothing on in a certain way. So like, say, a slightly loose tie, open shirt, rolled back sleeves and shit can actually work as a guy form of lingerie to a lot of women, or at least that's what I've been told. So when I see a quote unquote men's lingerie line and I'm looking at the pictures here, and it's a bunch of guys, or at least a bunch of male models in some red fishnets that are exposing some bits and leaving others closed, I'm finding it a little bit odd to find that, attractive to my fellow babe. Because if I was to wear this and then walk up to my shorty, would she look at me and get aroused, or would she look at me and get intrigued and wonder what it is that I thought when I was going to wear this shit? Like, that's how I'm looking at it. Because I'm wondering how it is that this would appeal to a market of guys that want to look attractive to their woman. Like, we don't usually subscribe to that shit, or at least we straight guys don't subscribe to that shit. So maybe it'll appeal to the gay guys, maybe there's a bunch of gay guys that love their bottoms, in lingerie like this, that are looking for options on like lingerie for, for their fellow gay partners. Or, there's some gay dudes that are like, I'd love to wear something like this because it would make me look super sexy in front of my partner. And maybe that's what's going to work for them. But honestly, the moment I saw this, I looked at it obviously from a straight guy's outlook, and I was like, no. There's no way that I would wear such a thing. Even though my shorty told me that she'd love to see me in that, I would not wear it even to save my life. But then again, maybe I'm not the target market. Maybe she's seen quite a lucrative side working with the LGBT, and this is her way of working with the LGBT to get money from the LGBT. And if that's her outlook on it, then clearly she's made smart business sense out of this. Because I do not think even 10% of the straight guy populace would ever consider wearing something like this. Like, we'd rather literally just go naked. But anyways, we should probably move it on because this is Tweetstreet. So on to our very first tweet of this episode. Get into a new relationship as soon as they dump you. There's no time to heal. You are not sick. Alright, so whenever I read shit like this, I usually sit and I think to myself, this is actually part of the reason why people find dating in Nairobi so hard to do. Because this sounds like the words of someone who is just toxic. Like, this is very toxic advice in my opinion. Because whenever you look at the idea of, you're out of a relationship, most times people are expected to kind of, take some time off and kind of figure themselves out, kind of get back to their own full selves before they decide to get into another commitment. But like, you're moving from one relationship to another, you don't know if you're carrying baggage, you don't know if you're carrying problems, you don't know if you even assessed whatever issues that might have affected you personally that caused the end of the relationship. You're just moving into that shit. And that is a premise for a very toxic relationship, or for very toxic behaviors that lead to a toxic relationship. And weirdly enough, I was actually talking to a friend a couple of days ago, and there was this very funny statement that he made that I found to be particularly interesting. He straight up said, for you to date in this Nairobi, you have to be toxic. And at first I looked at him and I was busy just laughing at the entire thing, but I thought about it for a second and I was like, you know what, he might actually have a point. Because when you look at statements like this, when you look at the acknowledgement that some people are toxic in relationships, and the fact that a lot of babes online will praise each other for toxic behavior, a lot of guys will acknowledge each other for toxic behavior, like, you can see how it actually starts to make a lot of sense. Like, you actually start to see how it is people are okay with getting into toxic relationship after toxic relationship after toxic relationship, because at the end of the day, people don't want to assess themselves and actually figure out if they're toxic or not. And even though they do, it's like, now you can take pride in being a toxic human being. Like, it's a very weird but somehow considered acceptable way of doing things, which, just no. Like, there's the whole dual mating theory thing that I've spoken about, the mate switch hypothesis, the whole, you're dating one person, but when it's on the rocks, you start with someone else. And it's a thing that happens, and it's happened for years, and I can get it. And such a tweet actually does emphasize it time and time again. The only thing is, whenever you're looking at such behaviors, you find that the person who has the dual mates, who has the two people that they're having a thing with, is usually ending one relationship on an internal level. They're learning to move on and get past them while they're still there. And they are sort of trying to pick up with someone else as, they're preparing to exit the relationship. And it's something that happens a lot. And I've said time and time again, babes are actually most notorious for this. But whenever you're finding such behavior, it's very easy to actually see how people end up becoming toxic, because you don't think you're the problem, or you just acknowledge that that's the person that you don't want to be with and you want to move on to someone else. You haven't asked yourself what it is that might have actually made that person unsuitable for you, yet you considered them to be good enough to date earlier on. You haven't asked yourself what it is that's causing the end of the relationship besides the fights that you people keep on having. You're just like, you know what, I'm done with this person, I'm moving on. Which is why I think a lot of us younger folk, a lot of us people in the teens and in the 20s, early to mid, probably not the late as much, will probably go and do such things. And it'll make sense, because at that point in time, you're casually dating. You're not really trying to date and go long term with someone. Because if you're trying to go long term with someone, then it's almost like you want to try and stack as many of your cards with them as possible. And it's not like you're trying to look for someone else while you're in the relationship. And at least that one will sort of make sense. But all in all, I find this to be very toxic advice. I don't think you should take it. I think if you are going to end things with somebody, even though you're going to do it and, switch and be with someone else almost immediately, at least acknowledge the things that wrecked you guys before you actually decide to start pulling the plug on something, yet you might be carrying baggage from one relationship to another. Anyways, that said, on to our very next tweet. Men, no sex before marriage is a lie. It is a statement she will use to keep you waiting as she swings from one branch to the next, sampling ceiling boards. Sex is not worth the wait. If you are not having it with her, she's having it with another one. Wow. This is a very interesting one. Now, can I really say that this is true? It's a bit debatable, because whenever I hear such a statement from a babe, there's usually two types of babes that'll kind of stick to this sort of lifestyle. It's usually the ones that never had sex before, they're virgins and they're waiting until they get married, of which, yes, they actually do still exist. They're rare, but they still exist. And there's the other ones that were having sex before that realized that they were not getting the value that they'd want from sex, and they decided to focus on the relationship and said that they would not do it up until they get their husband, they get the man that they're with, and probably the next time they intend on doing it is on that wedding night. All right, there's those two kinds of women. Now, can I say that this entire statement that this person on Twitter made applies to both of them? Not necessarily, because the person who's a virgin, and that's actually taking into account that she might actually be a virgin, if she is saying such a thing, then it's clearly a stance that she took from much earlier on, and she's reinforced that stance moving on. So maybe she's dated 3-4 guys, and maybe even some of those relationships ended simply because she said that she was not going to have sex with that guy. Now, about it being worth the wait, that one's very subjective. I personally don't think that it's always worth the wait. Sometimes you will wait for it and then it ends up being shit, But there's other times when it's absolutely amazing and the babe wants to do it like all the time from there on out because she loves it. But that's besides the point. The idea of no sex before marriage. Now, if it's a virgin, then it makes sense. If you're down for that, then, stick with her. Now, the problem with the person that used to have sex before but chose to stop is the fact that if you were doing it before and you stopped, it's going to make it hard for someone that would want to do it to understand why you choose to stop. And this is more so with the guys, because there's actually something that Kevin Samuels once said in a live stream some time back. He was like, you can't start banging this guy with a condom and only sticking to banging him with a condom, yet when you're with your ex, you used to do that shit raw. It doesn't work that way, because for us guys, we expect to get the best. So we're either getting the same or we're getting better. So the more ideal situation is if you are banging your ex with a condom and then you decide to start dating me and you're doing it raw, then all well and good. But you can't now move to the next guy and then want to go back to using a condom and shit. That's not how it works for us guys. So by the time you're moving to such a thing, then for us guys, we'll have a problem. And it will be a lot harder for the babe that was doing it before but chose to stop, as opposed to the one who's never done it before. But all in all, it still does come back down to the guy. Are you willing to wait? Are you willing to abstain for the sake of the possible relationship that you have with this woman? If that's the case, then stick around. But if that's not the case, then you can bounce. But this whole thing of, she might be banging someone else, if she wants to take that stance with you and then, go and bang other people while you're choosing to abstain, honestly, that shit might hurt you. But abstinence is a choice. You can choose to be there, or you can choose to go and start fucking around. Either way, it still comes back down to you. So whatever decision you choose to make is entirely up to you, but do not try and make her start banging simply because she used to do it before, when she already made her stance very clear. If you knew that was what you were getting into and she had that stance beforehand, then it's clearly you that made a bad decision in the spur of the moment and not with the long-term thought in mind. But anyways, that said, on to our final tweet of this episode. Pampers a 1600 bob. They last a week or less. Good night. Fellas, if this isn't the wake-up call to improve your pull-out game and use protection more often, then I don't know what is. I feel as though a lot of times when babes decide to have a kid, when babes decide to keep a kid, they usually don't think through a lot of these costs. Because kids are expensive. They are bloody expensive. Yes, you can look at the idea of having a bouncing baby girl or boy and how cute they'll be, and if they have genes from this guy, then the baby will look really good, and especially if it mixed up with your genes, and the baby can have your forehead and his eyes and your lips and his smile, blah blah blah. Yes, it can sound really, really nice to a lot of babes, but I do not think that they think of the financial and more so the long-term financial damage that these so-called oops baby kids will have. Because I have said this time and time again, women choose their baby daddies. And yes, it might be an oops baby, but a lot of times that babe usually has the option to abort or to keep the kid. A lot of times that babe probably even had the option to tell the guy to strap up or to tell the guy to nut outside. But did she take any of those options? No, she didn't. I'm not saying that they're always guilty, but a majority of the time they actually are. Like, we need to start accepting that children, even though they might seem accidental, are actually planned and purposeful. Like, when a babe decides to keep a kid, I feel like most times it's a very, very well planned thing. Like, they will plan on raising the kid and being with the kid and like nurturing them into something absolutely special because they're special human beings, blah blah blah. The only thing is, I don't know if they consider the financial ramifications of that shit. But maybe that's because they're not usually the ones that are expected to provide for the family. It's mostly the guys. It's the guys that will think about the fact that Pampers are 1600 bob. It's the guys that will think about the cost of baby clothing, baby formula and shit like that. Like, if you think that it's not that expensive to actually have a kid, I shit you the fuck not. If you're ever at a mall and you're doing any window shopping or even just have a couple of minutes to kill, go to the baby shops or go to the supermarket and go to the sections for the baby formula. And I kid you the hell not, you will actually realize how expensive it is to have a kid. Like, baby clothes are not cheap. Some of them cost the same as the clothes that I wear, yet I'm a full-grown adult, and they cost way more than what I've used up when I'm thrifting. Like, baby formula is not cheap, and that shit is consumed a lot. Milk, Pampers, just baby diapers, not even just Pampers in general. Pampers might even be one of the more expensive ones, but still, those things get used up fast because a baby gets changed 2, 3, 4 times a day? Like, now think about it, even though you have like 20 of them, that's 5 days worth of usage. Hell, maybe you can stretch it to probably about 6 or 7, but still, that's a lot of usage. So ladies, if you are pro-life, that's entirely up to you, but please consider contraceptives and consider the idea of having a kid, who you have the kid, but also when and if you're actually capable of having and raising that kid. Just please, just think about the financial ramifications that can come with that shit. Because that shit will affect you on a psychological level if you're unable to actually keep up with it. So please, before you decide to keep the kid, before you decide to get the kid, think about that. And to the fellas, because this is shit that plagues you on a daily. You are expected to be the provider of a family. You are expected to provide for the kid if and when it actually appears. And the unfortunate part of it is you have zero option the moment you nut. Like, that babe can choose to keep the kid, that babe can choose to not keep the kid, but at the end of it, it will still be 100% her choice. And it's unfortunate because you're the one that's going to be expected to provide. Personally, I feel like it should be a shared decision, because if she's going to have all the decision-making capability to whether she should have the kid or not, then let her also have all the decision-making capability to take care of that kid. Like, let that shit be shared, at least to a certain percentage with the guys. But all in all, as we're waiting for such a world when such a thing can actually exist, please be careful who you go raw with, be careful who you choose to nut in, but more so than that, remember that Drake is a pioneer for a very, very interesting method for ensuring that your kids go to the people that deserve your kids. If they try getting some of them, they will realize that you might be hot, but you've probably also got hot sauce. Anyways, that's been it from me, Sir Denver B. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. If you do have any thoughts, comments, or feedback, on Twitter it is at BagakaTheD, on Facebook it is at Breaktime on Westside, and on IG it is at Breaktime on Westside. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and if you are listening through Castbox, feel free to drop your thoughts and comments below, and I will attend to them accordingly, and I will catch you guys on the next break.